Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 387, or episode 18 in the Do Not Be Hasty Reckoning. I'm calling this one The Sad Story of Gollum. In this episode, we continue through Lord of the Rings, Book 1, Chapter 2, The Shadow of the Past. Greta?
Hey.
There you are.
Here I am. Back. And ready to chat.
Ready to chat. All right.
Ready to chat.
Right.
Yeah. Happy to be a part of the pod again.
I am happy that you are, for sure. Man, we may be a little rusty. This episode might be a little rough. All right.
We can do some exercises with our mouths.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do some of those stage exercises.
Yes.
All right. Well, moving on. Before we begin, we'd like to give a double up bear five to our amazing fellowship. Stig 'em up fellowship. 3, 2, 1. Whoopsht. Nice.
That was good. Those were all good.
Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, John R., KG, and EarendilHope. Mm-hmm. And big thank you to our newest patrons, one of whom is EarendilHope, as well as AH.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for joining our fellowship.
Yes.
Truly appreciate you.
Very much.
Also, a shout out to those celebrating their fellowship anniversary in August of 2024. The 1 Year Club, Emilio K, Brian B, and Wilbo Baggins. The 2 Year Club, Ben D and William J.H. And the 4 Year Club, Henry B and Jonathan L. Thank you all so much for sticking with us over the years. We truly appreciate you. All right. In this episode of Do Not Be Hasty, we continue through the Shadow of the Past as Gandalf explains to Frodo the sad story of Gollum, how the ring used him and then threw him away. This section begins with the words, "Gollum," cried Frodo. "Gollum? Do you mean that this is the very Gollum-creature that Bilbo met?" And ends with, "But I am not guessing now. I have seen him." This scene takes place in Frodo's 50th year, as does most of the chapter, The Shadow of the Past, a.k.a. Third Age 3018. Did I say Frodo's 50th year?
I think you did.
Yeah, Frodo's 50th year, a.k.a. Third Age 3018, or Shire Reckoning 1418, and specifically on April 13th of that year. We pick up in medias res from the last section, continuing from Gandalf's tragic tale of Sméagol and Daigle. I believe that several people wrote in and told me that I was pronouncing those two words incorrectly. I thought I was being all smart in my pronunciation by saying in media res, but in fact it is in medias res. Apparently, all of the pronunciations online that I could find said that, which surprises me. I could have sworn that I was taught when I was in high school to say it in media res, but anyway, I guess we're saying it. Some high school
education you got, man.
Yeah.
Hey, I didn't even know what it was, so I mean, you are at least doing better than me.
Yeah. In medias res. All right. Well, let's talk about what's going on in this section. Frodo's sudden realization. So after, for several of the sections now, most of this chapter, Gandalf has been kind of explaining to Frodo what's, the kind of what he's learned about the ring and, how he came to know it and the history of the ring. And it's at this moment that Frodo really starts to connect how it all comes back to him and how it arrived with him. Mm-hmm. He realizes that the figure that Gandalf referred to as Sméagol in the last section is in fact Gollum, right? The Gollum that Frodo would have known from hearing Bilbo's stories of his there and back again adventure. And the big thing here is that Frodo can't believe that Gollum was actually connected with hobbits, right? That Gollum, once upon a time, was actually a hobbit predecessor. For those of you who have listened to some of the recent episodes that I did on the prologue to Lord of the Rings, you will understand how this all connects. There were three prehistoric isn't the right term, but pre-Shire kind of ancestors of hobbits, and they were the Harfoots, the Stoors, and the Fallowhides. And so Sméagol and Daigle were Stoors specifically, Stoors. Right. So they were these of this people that lived to live near rivers and that kind of thing. Ironically, because you think of hobbits now not so much wanting that. But that was who they were. So in fact, yeah, Gollum was Sméagol, who was a Stoor. And one other thing that's brought out here is that Bilbo and Gollum understood each other remarkably well, right? Because of this kind of ancient connection. Okay.
I mean, riddles, case in point.
Yeah, yeah. Gandalf says that they understood each other a lot better than like a hobbit or a dwarf or an orc or an elf might, right? You know, I think of this like, I guess I think of this as like, you know, if you go like to another country, right, and you know, you're surrounded by this like foreign culture and everything like that, you know, you have to kind of become adjusted and adapt yourself to how they do things over there, right? Whether, you know, not even to mention like just the language barrier, right? But let's say you're over there in the middle of nowhere and you all of a sudden meet someone from like not just the US, but from the same region that you live in, right? Like the same region of the US that you live in. And, you know, all of a sudden it's like you just understand each other. Like, you know, you get it, right? You have a sort of an inbuilt set of codes that allow you to more easily communicate and arrive at similar minds, right? So I think that's what's going on here. Because of this, you know, deep connection, you know, I could even think of this as like, because they're both these kinds of like little people in this world of big people, right? There's this, you know, connection there, right? There's this connection there.
Yeah.
It doesn't even mean they like each other. It just means that they get each other, right? So I thought that was interesting, worth highlighting there. Frodo says that it is a sad story, right? And in the sense that like it might have happened to others, okay? Meaning the story of Gollum. And you know, this kind of gets us to that question of like why Gollum, right? And you kind of think about like when you hear about like really tragic stories or something like that, why did it happen to that person, right? Rather than someone else. You know, there's this sense of like if any of us, you know, if we are empathetic people, right, then we probably would react to like things like this and say like, there but for the grace of God go I, right? You know, and it which is just kind of an offhanded saying, but it gets into this really tough existential question, right? Why did it happen? You know, why did that happen to these people? You know, you can just think of somebody who like is unfortunate enough to live in a particular area during a particularly awful war, right? You know, as opposed, you know, and I think this theme comes up a lot throughout the Lord of the Rings. It's already come up in previous sections of this chapter where, you know, Frodo kind of laments that the ring has come to him, right? Yeah. That, you know, why did it have to come to me of all people, right? And so, you know, and not that we're going to arrive at an answer to that question here in this episode, but I think what this is all driving towards for me is that the only solution I think that makes much sense in a sort of like enabling you to get on with it and carry on the action that you need to do in this world is a perspective of pity, right? The only sort of, I think, thinking and rational perspective when it comes to those kinds of questions. You know, we'll get to that issue of pity in the next few episodes, and how important that is in the grand scheme of the Lord of the Rings, how fundamental that sort of attitude is. But yeah, all you can do is like when it comes to Gollum, you know, and you realize his backstory, right? All you can do is say like, you know, is sort of have pity for him, right? Anyway, what do you think of that, Greta? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, it does. I'm still kind of chewing on that and mulling it over a little bit. I guess what I'm, you know, what Gandalf is saying here is he basically saying like, he says it might have happened to others, even to some hobbits that I have known. Like basically, he's obviously in a way like relieving Gollum of some blame here. Would you say? And he's like, I mean, it was kind of like a wrong place, wrong time, almost, right?
Yeah, well, if you contrast that with the sort of theme in The Hobbit of like Bilbo's luck, right? Bilbo like constantly has kind of these little strokes of like, and the narrator refers to them as luck, right? And there, I think similarly, there's people that seem to be born with a streak of bad luck, right?
Agreed.
You know,
Yeah.
wrong place at the wrong time, kind of situation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you talk about some people like just seem to be charmed, right? Like things just go their way and good things happen to them without them even really trying, and you know, but then there's obviously, you know, the flip side of that, you know, where you're dealt kind of a crappy hand of cards and you just got to do the best with what you got.
yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think if we all think about, you know, think about our lives, the people we know, the people we've interacted with, we'll probably find different examples of, you know, both sides of the story, right? Like the people who have experienced like kind of good luck, you know, and maybe they even like throughout their lives seem to have kind of a stroke of good luck, and then, you know, others who, you know, just
can't catch a break,
like,
right?
yeah, can't catch a break.
Yeah.
Not only can they not catch a break, but maybe they were, you know, just really like, you know, even from a, you know, from a young age, you know, were, you know, really had something like kind of awful things happen to them, like came under the sway of powers that were far beyond like what they, you know, what they really had, the ability to resist or to push back on. Right.
Yeah.
So this is why I come to it, like not like the whole idea of pity, right? Because none of us are really like capable, you know, of fixing all these problems and making up for all of the bad luck in the world, right? But you know, I think in the midst, kind of in the immediate sense of what's going on here, this is where this perspective of pity really becomes pivotal in the course of the story and becomes a really powerful thing. And it's something that'll be developed over the course of the next several sections. So anyway, just food for thought, something to keep in mind as we continue.
And are you saying like pity as in like mercy or like empathy?
I think probably both, right?
Okay.
I think probably
I just
both.
really don't like the word pity. So I'm hoping we can kind of like talk about that and redefine it a little bit as we move forward. But
yeah, that's fair enough. Well, it'll come back up in a couple of episodes, so we'll come back to it then and deal with it more in the more immediate sense that it comes up.
Sounds good.
All right, so even Gollum was not wholly ruined. Let's read this. Let's read this passage here. I thought this was a good one. Even Gollum was not wholly ruined. He had proved tougher than even one of the wise would have guessed, as a hobbit might. There was a little corner of his mind that was still his own, and light came through it as through a chink in the dark. Light out of the past. It was actually pleasant, I think, to hear a kindly voice again, bringing up memories of wind and trees and sun on the grass and such forgotten things. But that, of course, would only make the evil part of him angrier in the end, unless it could be conquered, unless it could be cured. Gandalf sighed. Alas, there is little hope of that for him, yet not no hope.
Ooh, that's like a a dagger to the heart passage right there.
How so?
Oh, I mean, it's just like it just makes it like it's just so sad. Like it's so sad because you realize that even Gollum isn't totally gone. Like he's not hopeless. He's just on the other side of hopeless. You know, like it's almost like he's not totally gone.
He's right up to the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, he's right up to the edge of this cliff, and like there's still hope. But it's such a like glimmering. It's like a candle that's literally like about to be put out. You know, and it just, you know, like that particular that line there where Gandalf says there was a little corner of his mind that was still his own, and light came through it as through a chink in the dark. Which, you know, first of all, that's a beautiful image, like sad, but also very beautiful. You know, it's like, it kind of reminds me of like a flower, right? Like sprouting up between like the cracks in a sidewalk, or, you know, like where you're like, there's no way that could even be possible, but here it is. You know, just it gives you images of perseverance and determination. And you just realize that like Gollum is he's a very complicated case.
Yeah.
You know, and he's not, you know, like it's just like there's just enough hope, but not enough for him to actually be redeemed. And that's what I think is so sad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the image of it was actually pleasant, I think, to hear a kindly voice again, bringing up memories of wind and trees and sun on the grass and such forgotten things. You know, Gollum had been under the mountain, you know, for so long in the dark, you know, for so long, and it brought up this like distant memory of like wind and trees and sun, and all those things are like kind of images of like of freedom, right? Of a happier time and place.
Yes. Yes.
And
he wasn't always who we know him as today, right?
Yep. I love how this too, it strikes me that this really reveals something of Gandalf's heart to us, right? That he has all of this in mind, even as he's considering Gollum and, you know, the problem that Gollum presents for him, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But Gandalf's not just like, we have to hunt this guy down and, you know, get the truth out of him and then like be done with him, right? Gandalf still has a mind to like want to help him if at all possible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He's viewing him very much, I feel like, as a victim here, as someone who has just fallen prey to his unfortunate circumstances.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really hard to hate a victim, right? Because you almost see that they just didn't have control.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and it speaks to that, I think, literary truth that the best villains are always become the best when you go more into their backstory, how they became who they are, right? Because they're not just these one-dimensional villains anymore, but they're like real flesh and blood, and there's a sense, again, like that sense of it wasn't always like this, that something changed, and to be clear, like, it doesn't make them less of a villain necessarily, but it also just helps us kind of understand, like, maybe it's partly a cautionary tale, maybe, like, don't, this is how it happened to this person. Don't let yourself kind of fall into the traps that maybe they fell into. Be wary of falling into those traps. But also, like, that sometimes it's not like a person doesn't just wake up one day and is all like, I'm going to decide, I have decided to be evil. Boom. Right. As evil as can possibly be. Right. Zero to Satan in 30 seconds. Right. Like, that's really just not how it works. And I think even historically, that's not how it works, so often. So,
that's a good point.
Yeah. So, let's move on here. Let's go to, let's hear a little bit more about, Gollum's experience under the mountain. I really liked this passage, right? Where we read about Gollum's disillusionment, right? It says, all the great secrets under the mountains, read this, all the great secrets under the mountains had turned out to be just empty night. There was nothing more to find out, nothing worth doing, only nasty furtive eating and resentful remembering. He was altogether wretched. He hated the dark and he hated light more. He hated everything, and the ring most of all. I really liked this passage again because it, this sense of, like, that there was something in Gollum that, like, he was kind of, when we first meet him, it refers to Smeagol as, like, he's kind of obsessed with looking down, like, at the ground, and, like, and there's a mythical sense in which, like, you kind of read that, you almost read that in, like, a very, like, early Old Testament kind of sense of, like, typologically, but, like, there's also a sense in which, like, well, what's wrong with that? He was just interested in, like, the thing, like, things in the ground, right? Like, I mean, sometimes I'll look at the ground and be like, it's, crazy what in, like, one little, square foot of our yard, there's like a whole ecosystem, right? And it's kind of fascinating, right?
Yeah.
And you see all these different layers to it and everything. So there's something to that whole idea. But for Gollum, maybe that's partly why he had gone into the mountain to try to hide from everybody, right? Like he wanted to, like he was, intrigued by the notion there might be these great secrets under the mountain. But it just turned out to be this emptiness. And as I read that, I'm actually reminded too of Melkor in Ainulindale, right? When he kind of goes away from the rest of the Ainur in the deeps of time, right? Before, when the music is still in the process of happening and unfolding. And he searches out the void, right? He searches out the void, and he has kind of a mind for the void. And I see a parallel there between Melkor and kind of his original, perhaps, I don't know if I want to call it innocence, but like an original sort of before his kind of great fall, right? Like how he was wired, if you will, the things he was drawn to. And I see a parallel there on a great scale with Melkor, obviously, and then, a much smaller scale with Gollum. But, they're both kind of drawn to these dark places and the secrets of the dark places, right? And what might be there. And they both, and perhaps eventually both find it empty, right? Find an emptiness there. Does that emptiness reflect something inside of them?
Yeah. And what kind of occurred to me when I was reading this was like, in a way, like I feel like you could read this in a way you can interpret it such that, like, what Gollum is saying is that Gollum was deceived. He was misled.
Yes.
And so again, it's kind of that whole like victim like mentality, right? Like it's like he was led to believe that there were these great secrets under the mountains, and that he was. I don't know what he was looking for, but apparently something in him believed that there was going to be something wonderful and fantastic, and then it turned out to be nothing. So, there was a way in which, again, it was, like kind of something that he didn't have a whole lot of control over. I mean, yes, he could have chosen not to go to the mountains, but at the same time, when you think about it, it's like there's obviously a greater force at work here that he didn't have either the knowledge or the stamina or both to resist, right? Yeah. And as a result, he's, he became wretched.
Yeah. Again, it just draws me back to the whole perspective of pity and compassion, and it doesn't mean that, there's not a price to pay for evils that one personally commits. But I think it certainly also means that, and again, we'll come back to this, but when it's addressed more, when the question is addressed more directly in a later section, but, pity just seems to be like kind of what you have to fall back on in dealings with, with someone kind of mired in this kind of, moral mess, right? Moral morass, right?
Right. I mean, that's like when he sums it up there, he says he hated everything and the ring most of all. Right. So the ring, even though he continues to call it his precious, right. And this is like, obviously some part of him recognizes the detriment that this ring has caused him. Surely. Yeah. So he hates it, but at the same time, he can't get rid of it. Like he can't just be like, I'm done with you, and that's a terrible place to be. Yeah. To loathe something, but yet be unable to shake it.
Well, this is interesting too, because just after Gandalf remarks about he hated everything in the ring most of all, he says he hated it and loved it as he hated and loved himself, right? He could not get rid of it. He had no will left in the matter. It's almost like the ring had become a part of him, right? Like had it and kind of inserted itself into him and become a part of him, right? And again, like he didn't know that would happen, right? Like he didn't know that it would have that kind of power over him when he first came upon it, right? He stumbled upon it by accident, right? Or rather, Daigle did, and then subsequent accidentally, Smeagol did, right? He was drawn into the same accident of finding it. So yeah, he hated it and loved it as he hated and loved himself. I mean, this is, very much, I'm guessing, a similar language of addiction, right? To addiction,
Yes.
to substance addiction and other forms of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
That, you both hate and love it. And it becomes part of your identity. You identify with it, eventually, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the snare. That's the snare it puts you into.
Exactly, because like even in that one line where it says that he hated it and loved and loved it, and he hated and loved himself. Like it's almost like he and the ring were one, right? Like he had become the ring, and the ring had become him. And so to get rid of the ring was to get rid of himself. So it was really like there was no way out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So a ring of power looks after itself. So it was not Gollum, Frodo, but the ring itself that decided things. I'm sorry, it was not Gollum or Frodo, but the ring itself that decided things. It uses others. First Isildur, then Daigle, then Sméagol, Gollum, and then Bilbo. Right? It kind of leapfrogs from possessor to possessor in an effort to get back to Sauron. Right? It's almost like a slow moving boomerang, if you will, just like taking people out, in the process of getting back to where it started. Right? And Bilbo, we observe, was the only one that has been able to relinquish it. And why is that? Why was Bilbo ultimately able to? Now, it wasn't easy for Bilbo to relinquish it.
Not easy.
But he was ultimately able to do so. So why was that? What do you think?
I don't know, but I can't help but think that Gandalf, like just with the fact that he's a Maya, right? And like has this like otherworldly power played a part, right? I mean, Gandalf even says like I had to help him, right? So of his own volition, I don't think Bilbo would have been able to. But I think, he was wise in who he chose to surround himself with and the community that he was living in, and just, that he had Gandalf on his side, I think was huge for him. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, I think this is where that question of pity comes back. It'll come up again in a few sections. But Bilbo does not come into possession. So in the case of Isildur, right? Isildur had the encouragement of Elrond. He had seen the power of the ring. He was right there where it needs to be destroyed, right? And nevertheless, he chose to keep it, right? He justified it as being Wergild for the deaths of his father and his brother, right? And he surely justified it in his mind by saying, with all of the destruction wrought by Sauron, I'll need this powerful device to aid me in rebuilding and strengthening my people, right? In the case of Daigle, I mean, he barely even had it long enough to consider what it was, but basically the ring pitted him and his cousin Sméagol against one another immediately, and only one of them came out alive, right? In the possession of it, because they both fought over it, right? Neither one was willing to relinquish it to the other, right? And so why ultimately did Bilbo was he able to relinquish it? Probably because I wouldn't call it completely pure the way he got it, but he didn't seize the ring, right? He didn't seize the ring. He fled with it after. I guess what I mean by seizing the ring is like I want it, right? Like the Isildur, I want it, right? I know I should destroy it, but I want it, right? And here are all my reasons to justify me having it, right? Sméagol and Daigle, right? I want it. One of them dies, and the other one hangs on to it forever, right? For hundreds of years. And then Bilbo comes along. He finds it because Sméagol, Gollum, had fumbled it at some point, right? And he just finds it, finds it in the dark, puts it in his pocket, not even really thinking about it, right? And then he has to flee because Gollum goes into a murderous rage, right? So Bilbo is the only one who comes into possession of it. Of those four characters, is the only one that comes into possession of it without really kind of that seizing it. You know what I'm saying? That spiritual seizing,
like
yeah,
a more innocent way.
Yeah,
he came like he didn't have to exercise any kind of violence or like it was more of like a I found this. Not here, let me kill someone or let me take what is not mine knowingly.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like some innocence and ignorance there, maybe.
Innocence, ignorance, possibly forbearance, and also this factor, right? Behind that, there was something else at work beyond any design of the ring maker. I can put it no plainer than by saying that Bilbo was meant to find the ring and not by its maker. In which case, you also were meant to have it, and that may be an encouraging thought. Of course, Frodo says immediately it is not.
It's not.
But we understand again where Gandalf is coming from, right? Gandalf, of course, knows of the greater powers that can be at work in the world. Even, again, Gandalf would have been in the music of the Ainur, so he knows of Eru. He knows of the kind of the larger picture workings of Eru and of the Valar. And so Gandalf has discerned that there's this larger force at play, right?
That's greater than
its
the
maker
ring itself.
Yeah, greater than the ring and greater than its maker.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so, again, like, why was Bilbo? Why was it Bilbo that was chosen? So it's interesting because it's like, on one hand, the ring seems to have wanted to get away. Was like, okay, it's time to get away from Gollum. This guy's a total loser. I don't need him anymore. It's time to get back to Sauron, right?
Well, I mean, doesn't Gandalf even say as much? Like, the ring realized that Gollum was a dead end, right? He was never going to climb out of his dark, deep pool, right? Like, there was no way the ring was going to make it back to Sauron with Gollum, because Gollum was just content to, live in the dark and eat raw fish. So.
Mm-hmm. And orcs.
Orcs.
Yeah, every once in a while, Gollum would, find an orc that had gotten. Yeah, it says that.
Oh.
Different in The Hobbit, right?
Gollum was able to overtake an orc.
Yeah, he would sometimes if an orc, kind of lost the rest of its company and under the mountain, then he would like attack the orc and kill it, and then he would eat the orc.
That's really gross. I thought raw fish was gross, but
it's all gross.
Orc is even worse.
It's all gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Eru. So yeah, there's this sense in which Bilbo is meant to find the ring. It wants to get away from. So when Bilbo comes along, it's almost like, this larger force will just kind of leave nameless for the time being. But this opposing force knew that the time was coming that the ring would try to make an escape, right? Would try to get away from Gollum. And so it put Bilbo into the situation, right? It put Bilbo there to be the receiver.
It orchestrated events.
Yes.
So that Bilbo would be in its path. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's just interesting, like the twists and turns of fate and of these larger guiding forces.
Yep.
Fascinating. So, all right. Bilbo's finding it was an unexpected turn, a tiny catastrophic moment. That's what I wrote there. Tiny catastrophic moment, right?
I think Frodo would beg to differ.
Well, catastrophic moment, not necessarily for Frodo, but for
humanity.
For humanity.
Yeah. Agreed.
So the last little bit of this section deals with Frodo's kind of like, okay, how do you know all this, right? Like, how do you know that this is actually the ring? And Gandalf basically says, like, because of the fire writing, like, I know for sure now that it's the ring, right? And Frodo's like, okay, but how did you like know, like even come to suspect that, right? Because otherwise, you know, if I didn't throw it at the fire, it just looks like a regular ring, right? And Gandalf says he knew the background, as do all the wise. He strongly suspected Bilbo's ring as the One Ring, and the writing confirmed his suspicion. So he knew enough of the lore to have a strong suspicion, and then it was when they uncovered the fire writing that that he knew for sure that this is the ring, right? And as far as how he came to know all of this story about Gollum, you know, much of it he has kind of guessed and discerned through uncovering of different aspects of the lore. But finally he's kind of confirmed it all with having seen Gollum and interacted with Gollum himself. And that is where the section ends.
Frodo is aghast.
Yes, Frodo is aghast.
You have seen Q gasp. You have seen Gollum?
That's actually where the next section begins, so don't get ahead of yourself.
Well, it's just a little teaser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Greta, what did I miss?
Nothing.
Nothing?
It was great.
Nerfing?
Yeah. Fantastic conversation.
All right.
Yeah. Well done.
Well, the story of Gollum is indeed a sad one. Though he has done much evil since, in a way it's as though he was simply an innocent figure that happened to be standing in the way of a fast-moving freight train. He was overpowered by the ring's lure, likely tempted beyond what he could bear. How should one think of such a figure, even when considering the future evils he commits? In the next few episodes, we'll continue to consider Gandalf's perspective on Gollum, and how Bilbo's attitude of pity was more powerful than one might expect. Stay tuned.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider supporting us in one or all of the following ways. First, join the Fellowship of the Road by visiting patreon.com/TolkienRoad. When you join the Fellowship of the Road, it helps us to keep on evering on and lands you some cool perks along the way. Learn more at patreon.com/TolkienRoad.
Second, if you're watching, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below.
Finally, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or the platform of your choice. If you are a 5-star fan of the Tolkien Road, you can really help us out by heading over to iTunes or your preferred source for this show and dropping us a rating and review. When you do that, it helps us get the word out about the Tolkien Road, which helps us to keep on evering on.
As always, keep the correspondence coming. We'll do our best to respond to you somehow and at some point. With Do Not Be Hasty, we'll let the mail pile up and then do a big mailbag episode at the end of each chapter. While we can't promise you that your mail will be read on air, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so drop those comments and send those emails.
Finally, don't forget to stop by truemythspress.com for great merch like super styling and comfy Tolkien Road t-shirts, 2 Trees camper mugs, and signed copies of John's books, Tolkien's Requiem and Tolkien's Overture. Once again, that's truemythspress.com. Thanks for supporting our work with your purchase.
To close, as always, we'd like to thank our amazing fellowship. We know all of you half as well as we should like, and we've thanked less than half of you half as well as you deserve. Special thanks to the following: John R.,
Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien,
KG,
EarendilHope,
Emilio P,
Jonathan D,
Richard K,
Paul D,
Julia,
Werty,
Chris B,
Tour 91,
Carolyn S,
Emil K,
Brian O. II,
Jonathan R,
Matthew W,
Daniel D,
Harrison C,
Jason C,
Seb M,
Wilbo Baggins,
Ms. Anonymous,
Andrew T,
Red Hawk,
Shannon S,
Brian O. I,
Zeke F,
James L,
Chris L,
Ozia V,
Ish of the Hammer,
Teresa C,
David of Pints with Jack,
and Eric B. Finally, thanks to all for watching and or listening. Until next time, the road goes ever on.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.